Hey everybody, another week of Come Follow Me. Now this week, I can't even remember where the reading is because I did it and there's some really awesome points we're going to talk about. I know one of it's Matthew 4, I think it's Matthew 4 and 5, and I'm going to say Luke something. Anyway, doesn't matter. You know what it is. You can find it on the app. It's just been one of those weeks. So I've got some really quick things to sort of look at and no notes. So freestyling and yeah, hoping it's not too disjointed. But first off, I was thinking, the way that we have studied this, although it's awesome and it's going to teach us a lot of lessons, so far we've been looking at different authors. So you've got to imagine there's one event that happens and there's 4 accounts that we have, and it's like if there was, say, a car accident, not that I'm comparing Jesus' life to a car accident, but I'm or any type of crime that happened where you go to a court and there's, witnesses. And so you've got these 4 gospels that are witnesses of Christ, but not all of them are going to write about the same things or in the same way, because one's writing after the events, went back and interviewed everyone. That's Luke, remember? So he writes very beautifully. It's a well put together story. Mark is more likely to have written down what Peter told him at the time. John writes what he saw, and he comes into the picture later and just starts off from there, so he doesn't really record anything about Christ's birth or early life. And then you've got Matthew, who's telling a story as best he can in his publican way, as in his very official, here's the history kind of way. So you got 4 different accounts in different ways of seeing it, and some were there, some were not, some were third-hand accounts that they had heard. So you can imagine being in court and someone saying, oh, so what happened on the event of that day? And you say, well, I wasn't actually there, but I heard from the person who was in the accident that this happened. And it's well, that's good to know, but we need to corroborate it with other accounts, and that's why we have 4 Gospels of Jesus' life. They were picked. So, and the way we're studying them, we're taking bits, and I said to my husband, I'm like, are you confused with the timeline? He's like, yeah, a little bit, because we've sort of jumped, and because they're writing in their own way and what they've seen and heard at that time, they don't really line up equally across, although they line up in what happens. Chronologically, the way they've written doesn't always line up. So I've got a short timeline for you that I put together, and then I'll tell you where I got it from, so that if you want the more expanded, beautiful version, you want to print that off. So they used to be available at distribution centres for 50 cents a dollar, something like that. But that was 10 years ago. So I doubt anyone still got those. Maybe some of you do, and yay if you got them out. But let's have a look. Okay, so we're going to start off with, because we know Christ got born, and we know he had that time, in Egypt, and his parents, that was fairly consistent across the accounts that recorded that, and we studied that, and then he came back with his parents, and we're going to go back to Jerusalem and headed off into Nazareth instead to be safe, as was told to Joseph, and Mary felt the same thing, so off they went there. And then the next time we encounter him, he's in the temple at 12 teaching there. And then he sort of just disappears again because he's off learning and becoming and growing, so he can be the saviour of the world. So we're going to pick it up in John 1, where he meets some of, and I've written this out really badly, meets some of John the Baptist's disciples. Remember when Simon said, where do you live? And we discussed that. That actually means more of who are you? Let us get to know you. Can we come and spend some time with you? So that's there. If you remember, we talked about that one. So that's in John 1. Then he gets baptized. So he turns up, which we talked about last week, where he just randomly, well, not randomly, quite unexpectedly, joins the queue of people to get baptized. John the Baptist knowing who he is. So that's in all 4 Gospels. And he was at this time about 27 to 30 years old. And it actually says he began to be about 30 years old. So that could be anything from 27 to 30, depending, because we don't know exactly how many months were between. They didn't exactly write this down and go, write the date next to it. And if they did, it was not turned over. So there you go. But that's in all 4 Gospels, his baptism. Some more longer accounts, some others we covered last week. We covered the one in Mark, because they had a better explanation of the Holy Ghost and what that looked like. So we covered that last week as well. And then he goes to fast in the wilderness. So that's what we're talking about this week. And that's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I put here 40 days has deeper meaning. In Hebrew, it means a long time. So whether it was actually 40 days or whether it was around 40 days, but it was a long time. And remember, 40 days refers to Noah and the ark, is 40 days of, it comes up a lot. 40 is a significant number in Hebrew. Hebrew likes significant numbers, and there's more in there to that. And if you want to go study the Hebrew numbers and their meaning, go ahead. But yeah, that's got more meaning. And this is probably in late winter that he went into the wilderness to fast. Where he was, late winter where he was, which would have been summer down here in New Zealand. So about this time of year probably. Now, after that, he finds out that John the Baptist is in prison and sends angels to attend him. And you're like, this is news to me. Elder Bednar did an amazing live on this. So if you've got Instagram, go look at Elder Bednar's account because the live will be recorded there. And he talks about this, about how, and Christ-like characteristics, how Christ had just been through this enormous tempting from Satan, which is what we're talking about this week. And it's not just about the temptation, and I'll talk about that in a separate one. But yeah, it's not just about that. But that after this, if you look in the Joseph Smith translation, the verse that says, after all this happened and angels came and attended him, was actually Jesus knowing, John the Baptist, my dear friend and cousin, is in prison. I'm sending angels to attend to him. So that's how that works. So look at that. That's in Joseph Smith, Matthew 4:11. If you can't find Joseph Smith translation on your devices, it's in the like where all the Bible dictionary and the gospel topics areas. So yeah, just go look in there and you'll see Joseph Smith translation. You better go to 4:11 and have a better read of that. But yeah, Elder Bednar does talk about that, and he says it way better than I do. So if you have Instagram, go look at that. If you don't, find someone with it and go look at that. Just search up David A. Bednar and it'll be right there. He put it out. So what are we? We're Friday the 28th here, I think. 26th, 26th. It was in the 20 weeks. So I think it was like the 23rd, 24th he put that out. 23rd. I'm going to say 23rd. So have a look for that. You'll be able to find that. Then, after that happens, some other just events that we're familiar with. So, and we're going to look at these in the coming weeks because we're going to go back into John. So there's water to wine in the wedding in Cana. The ejects money changes at the temple. And I'm thinking now as I'm showing this to you, it's probably going to be backwards, but you get the idea. I'm sure you can read it. And there's a meeting. He meets Nicodemus, preaches and baptizes in Judea. And this is where they find out, like it becomes common knowledge, that John the Baptist is imprisoned. And these are all found, John, and then Luke. And we'll cover those in the coming weeks. After all of that, he teaches the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well, which we're very familiar with, woman at the well, and that again is in John. And then he heals the son of a nobleman, that's in John. And then he heals man with unclean spirits, and that's in Mark. And I think we covered that. I covered that this week. I don't know. I can't remember. But see, that's what I mean. It gets a little mixed up. But that's when those things happen. And then he calls Peter, Andrew, James, and John to come follow him. Now, we covered that last week too. We talked about straightway they went. So that was last week we talked about this event. Then he heals a leper. It's found in Mark. And then he calls and ordains his apostles officially. And we can find that in Matthew. So that's the trail there. So he calls these 4 here to come follow him, knowing that he's going to call them officially. And they're accepting that call. But then this happens, and then he gets the rest of them together and officially calls and ordains them all with the priesthood keys and everything. And that's where we're sort of at the moment. And if you're wondering, where the heck did you get this information? Because I'd like to know more. Well, that's from this beautiful thing. Now, I had to print it out because, as I said, I don't think distributions have got them anymore. But you will find this, if you want to look at this, or you want to print off your own copy, you're going to find this in the Ensign. So if you go to Gospel, our church website, and you go to Church Library, Magazines, Ensign, and then you want 2003, and it's in 3 parts, January, April, and July. There's a gospel timeline for the entire New Testament. It goes right through Christ's life, and after that includes all the stuff Paul's doing. So it might be a really handy resource for you this year, and it's free, right? And done from the church. Yay. Accurate. Includes Joseph Smith translation stuff, which is awesome. So there's my basic timeline. So I'll leave that one with you, and then we'll go talk about some of the points this week. So I hope that helped clear up a little like of, oh, so that's how it sort of flowed, hoping that's what it does. Anyway, I'll see you soon for the next one.